The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty compound, as Colonel Martinez watched through his binoculars. Something was different about Sergeant Sarah Chen today. She sat alone by the armory, methodically cleaning her M24 sniper rifle with an intensity he had never seen before. Her movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as she worked the cleaning rod through the barrel again and again. The other soldiers gave her a wide berth. Word had spread quickly through the base about what happened 3 days ago during the rescue mission. The official report stated that Sergeant Chen had made an impossible shot, but the details remained classified. Only a handful of people knew the truth, and those who did struggled to believe it themselves. Chen had been part of the elite sniper unit for 2 years, but she had always been quiet, keeping to herself. She came from a small farming town in Iowa, where her father had taught her to hunt deer in the vast cornfields. Her recruitment scores were impressive, but nothing had prepared anyone for what she was truly capable of. As Colonel Martinez approached, he noticed her hands trembling slightly. This was unusual for someone known for having the steadiest hands in the entire division. Chen looked up as his shadow fell across her workspace, her dark eyes holding a mixture of pride and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Morning, Sergeant," the colonel said, settling down on a nearby crate. "Mind if I sit with you for a moment?" Chen nodded silently, continuing her cleaning routine. The M24 gleamed in the sunlight, every component spotless and perfectly maintained. She had been at this for over an hour, but she showed no signs of stopping. "You know," the colonel continued, watching her careful movements, "I've been in the military for 23 years. I've seen shots that defied physics, witnessed moments that changed the course of entire missions. But what you did out there," he paused, shaking his head slowly, "I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it." Chen's hand stilled for a moment. She looked down at her rifle, then back at the colonel. "Sir, with respect, no one was supposed to know the details. The mission report was classified for a reason. You're right, Sergeant. But sometimes the impossible needs to be acknowledged, even if it can't be publicly celebrated." The colonel leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "That shot you made wasn't just impressive. It was mathematically impossible according to every ballistics expert I've consulted." A small crowd of soldiers had begun to gather at a respectful distance, pretending to go about their daily routines while stealing glances at the conversation. Chen noticed them and felt the familiar weight of unwanted attention. She had joined the military to serve her country, not to become some kind of legend. "Sir, I just did my job," she said quietly, resuming her cleaning with even more focus. "My team needed support and I provided it. Nothing more, nothing less." But the colonel could see through her modest exterior. He had read the preliminary reports from the mission. Chen had taken a shot from over 2 miles away, in crosswinds that should have made accuracy impossible, through a narrow window of opportunity that lasted less than 3 seconds. The target had been moving, partially concealed, and the angle required her to calculate for multiple environmental factors that would challenge even the most experienced snipers. What made it truly remarkable wasn't just the technical difficulty. It was what that shot had saved. An entire squad of Marines had been pinned down by enemy fire, with no hope of extraction. Traditional air support couldn't reach them due to the terrain, and ground reinforcements were still hours away. Chen had volunteered for what everyone assumed would be a futile mission. "Sergeant," the colonel said, his voice carrying a weight of authority mixed with genuine concern, "I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest with me." Chen looked up again, her expression guarded. "How did you know you could make that shot? Even our most advanced computer models suggested it was beyond human capability." For a long moment, Chen said nothing. She assembled her rifle with practiced efficiency, each piece clicking into place with satisfying precision. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of the busy military base. "I didn't know, sir. I just knew I had to try." 3 days earlier, the pre-dawn briefing had been tense and urgent. Intelligence reports indicated that a Marine reconnaissance team had been compromised deep in enemy territory. What should have been a routine information-gathering mission had turned into a nightmare when they stumbled into a well-organized ambush. Chen sat in the back of the briefing room, listening as Major Thompson outlined the desperate situation. The Marines were trapped in a canyon with high walls on 3 sides, facing an enemy position that had been fortified over several months. Every attempt at radio contact had been met with static, but satellite imagery confirmed movement in their last known position. The problem, Major Thompson explained, pointing at the tactical map projected on the wall, is that conventional rescue operations are impossible. The terrain makes helicopter extraction too dangerous, and any ground assault would result in significant casualties on both sides. Chen studied the topographical data carefully. The enemy position was situated on a rocky outcropping that provided perfect cover and commanding views of all approach routes. Traditional sniper positions wouldn't work either, as the surrounding area had been cleared of suitable vantage points months ago. "Ma'am," Chen raised her hand tentatively. "What about the old watchtower on Hill 247? Major Thompson frowned, checking her maps. "That position is over 2 miles from the target area, Sergeant. It's well beyond effective range for any weapon system we have available." "With respect, ma'am, I'd like to run some calculations," Chen replied. "The elevation difference might create opportunities that flat ground ballistics don't account for." Several of the more experienced soldiers in the room exchanged skeptical glances. 2 miles was an extraordinary distance for any sniper shot, even under perfect conditions. The current weather reports showed variable winds, and the time constraints meant there would be little opportunity for ranging shots or environmental adjustments. Captain Rodriguez, Chen's immediate supervisor, spoke up. "Sergeant Chen is one of our most accurate marksmen, but even she has never attempted anything at that range under combat conditions." Chen felt the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach, but she pushed it aside. She had spent countless hours studying ballistics theory and practicing at the range. More importantly, she understood something that the textbooks couldn't teach. Sometimes the impossible became possible when lives depended on it. "I'd like permission to conduct a reconnaissance of the position." "Ma'am," Chen said, "if I can't make the shot work, we'll know within an hour." "If I can," she paused, meeting Major Thompson's eyes, "we might be able to provide the support our Marines need." The Major considered this for several long moments. The conventional rescue plans all carried significant risks, and time was running out. Satellite feeds showed increasing enemy activity around the trapped Marine position, suggesting that a full assault on their defensive position was being planned. "Very well, Sergeant. You have 2 hours to assess the viability of your proposed solution. Captain Rodriguez will accompany you with a full support team." As the briefing broke up, Chen gathered her equipment with methodical care. Her M24 sniper rifle had been her constant companion for 2 years, and she knew every quirk and characteristic of the weapon. She packed extra ammunition, wine measurement tools, and her personal range cards that contained detailed notes about bullet drop and environmental corrections. Captain Rodriguez approached as she secured her gear. "Chen, I need to ask you directly. Do you really think this is possible, or are you just volunteering because no one else will?" Chen looked up from her equipment check. "Sir, honestly, I don't know if it's possible. But I know that if we don't try, those Marines are going to die. And I'd rather fail attempting something impossible than succeed at doing nothing." The drive to Hill 247 took 45 minutes over rough terrain. Chen used the time to study meteorological data and run preliminary calculations in her head. Wind speed, air density, temperature gradients, and Coriolis effect all had to be factored into a shot of this distance. When they reached the abandoned watchtower, Chen immediately understood why it had been dismissed as a viable position. The structure was partially collapsed, offering minimal cover and an awkward shooting angle. But as she climbed to the highest stable platform and looked through her scope, she saw something others had missed. The distance was indeed extraordinary, but the elevation provided a clear line of sight over the enemy's defensive barriers. More importantly, the morning sun would be directly behind her position, making it nearly impossible for the enemy to spot muzzle flash or scope reflection. "Captain," she called down to Rodriguez, "I need you to set up wind measurement equipment at 3 different elevations, and I need someone to monitor radio frequencies for any change in the Marine team's situation." As her support team spread out to gather environmental data, Chen settled into her shooting position and began the complex process of calculating one of the most difficult shots ever attempted by a military sniper. She had less than an hour to determine if she could save 7 Marines who were counting on a miracle they didn't even know was coming. Chen pressed her eye to the scope and immediately understood the magnitude of the challenge before her. At over 2 miles, the enemy position appeared as tiny specks that flickered in and out of focus through the heat shimmer rising from the canyon floor. Her target wasn't just distant, It was partially concealed behind rocky outcroppings that provided natural camouflage. "Wind readings, Corporal Martinez," she called softly to her spotter. "Variable crosswinds, Sergeant. Ground level shows 8 to 12 miles per hour from the southwest, but the mid-level readings are inconsistent. We're getting gusts up to 20 miles per hour at different altitudes." Chen absorbed this information while continuing to study the terrain through her scope. Wind was always a sniper's greatest enemy, but at this distance, even a slight miscalculation would send her bullet yards off target. She needed to account not just for the wind at her position, but for the changing wind conditions her bullet would encounter during its 3-second flight time. Captain Rodriguez climbed up to her position, carrying a tablet with real-time meteorological data. "Chen, I've been running the numbers through our ballistics computer. Even with perfect conditions, the bullet drop at this range would be over 40 feet. Add in the wind variables, and the computer suggests the probability of a successful hit is less than 2%. "What does the computer know about impossible shots, sir?" Chen replied, making minute adjustments to her scope. "Besides, I'm not aiming where the computer thinks I should." She had spent the last 30 minutes studying the enemy position through high-powered binoculars, memorizing every detail of the rocky terrain. The target that needed to be eliminated was an enemy sniper who had been picking off any Marine who tried to move from cover. Intelligence reports indicated he was using a Soviet-era Dragunov rifle and had already wounded 2 Marines. The enemy sniper's position was clever, a natural rock formation that provided excellent cover while allowing him to control the entire canyon floor. But Chen had noticed something others had missed. Every few minutes, thermal air currents caused a slight shift in the vegetation around his position, creating a brief window where his silhouette became visible against the lighter-colored rock behind him. "Sergeant," Corporal Martinez said urgently, "radio intercept indicates the enemy is planning a coordinated assault on the Marine position in approximately 20 minutes. If we're going to act, it has to be now." Chen felt her heartbeat slow as she entered the focused state that every sniper knew well. The world around her seemed to fade away, leaving only her rifle, and the impossible shot that lay ahead. She began her breathing routine. Deep inhale, partial exhale, hold, and gently squeeze the trigger during the natural pause between breaths. But first, she needed to solve an equation that would challenge any mathematician. Bullet velocity, gravity, air resistance, wind drift, the Coriolis effect caused by Earth's rotation, and even the curvature of the Earth itself all had to be calculated and compensated for. At this distance, missing by a single degree of angle would result in a miss measured in yards, not inches. "Captain," she said quietly, "I need you to time the thermal cycles. Watch that patch of scrub brush at bearing 273 degrees. Every time it shifts, count the seconds until it shifts again." Rodriguez raised his binoculars and began timing the patterns Chen had observed. "Looks like roughly 90 seconds between movements, with each visible window lasting about 4 to 6 seconds. Chen nodded, continuing to refine her calculations. She had decided to aim not for where her target was, but for where he would be when her bullet completed its journey. This required her to predict not just the thermal air current cycles, but also the enemy sniper's behavioral patterns. Through patient observation, she had noticed that the enemy shooter fired approximately every 2 minutes, then shifted position slightly within his concealed area. If she timed her shot correctly, she could hit him during the brief moment when he was most exposed. "Range cards updated," she murmured to herself, making final scope adjustments. The crosshairs were now aimed at a point that appeared to be empty air, factoring in bullet drop, wind drift, and the predicted movement of her target. Captain Rodriguez checked his watch. 15 minutes until the enemy assault begins, Chen. The Marines are running out of time." Chen chambered around and settled into her final shooting position. Her breathing slowed even further, and she felt the familiar calm that came with absolute focus. In her mind, she visualized the bullet's path, leaving the muzzle at over 2,000 feet per second, following a precise parabolic arc through changing wind conditions, arriving at exactly the right place at exactly the right moment. "Target cycle beginning," Corporal Martinez whispered. "Thermal shift in 10 seconds. Chen's finger found the trigger and applied the gentlest pressure, waiting for the perfect convergence of timing, mathematics, and instinct that would determine whether 7 Marines lived or died. Through her scope, she watched for the brief shadow that would indicate her target's movement into the kill zone she had calculated. Shift beginning. Now, Martinez called softly. Chen held her breath and squeezed the trigger. The rifle's recoil pushed firmly against Chen's shoulder as the shot broke cleanly. The muzzle blast echoed off the rocky walls of the watchtower, and for a moment the world seemed suspended in silence. Through her scope, Chen watched the empty space where she had aimed, knowing that her bullet was now traveling through over 2 miles of unpredictable air currents and gravitational pull. 3.2 seconds. That was how long it would take for the bullet to complete its journey, if her calculations were correct. 3.2 seconds during which the fate of 7 Marines hung in the balance. Captain Rodriguez held his breath beside her, his binoculars trained on the distant enemy position. Corporal Martinez continued monitoring radio frequencies, hoping to hear something, anything, that would indicate the status of the trapped Marines. Impact, Chen whispered, though she couldn't yet see the results of her shot through the heat shimmer and distance. For several agonizing moments, nothing seemed to change. The enemy position remained silent and still. Chen began to wonder if she had missed entirely, if her impossible calculations had been just that. Impossible. Then Captain Rodriguez's voice broke the silence. "I've got movement in the Marine position. Someone's waving an orange signal panel." Chen felt a surge of relief, but she forced herself to remain focused. One shot had been fired, but the mission wasn't complete until the Marines were safely extracted. Through her scope, she continued to monitor the enemy fortification, looking for any signs of response to her shot. Radio contact established with the Marine team, Corporal Martinez announced excitedly. "They're reporting that enemy sniper fire has ceased." "Repeat. Enemy sniper fire has ceased." Captain Rodriguez lowered his binoculars and stared at Chen with an expression of disbelief. "Sergeant, I don't know how you did it, but you just saved 7 lives with a shot that shouldn't have been possible." Chen remained in her shooting position, still watching through her scope. Years of training had taught her that one successful shot didn't mean the threat was eliminated. The enemy position could have multiple snipers or reinforcements could arrive at any moment. "Captain, we need to confirm the target is neutralized and provide overwatch for the extraction," she said calmly. "This isn't over until our people are safe." Over the next hour, Chen maintained her position while the complex extraction operation unfolded. With the enemy sniper eliminated, helicopter support was able to approach the Marine position and begin evacuating the wounded. Chen provided continuous overwatch, her rifle ready to engage any threats that emerged. Through intercepted radio communications, they learned more about the impact of her shot. The enemy sniper she had eliminated was apparently a highly skilled marksman who had been terrorizing coalition forces for months. His removal from the battlefield had caused immediate confusion and demoralization among the enemy forces in the area, but it was the technical details of the shot that left everyone speechless. When the after-action analysis was completed, ballistics experts confirmed that Chen had made a successful hit at a range of 3,540 meters, or just over 2 miles. The bullet had traveled through multiple wind layers, compensated for significant bullet drop, and arrived at precisely the right moment to eliminate a moving target. "Chen," Captain Rodriguez said as they prepared to leave the watchtower, "in 20 years of military service, I've never seen anything like what you just accomplished. That shot defied every principle of physics and probability that I understand." Chen carefully cleaned and secured her rifle, treating it with the same methodical care she always showed her equipment. "Sir, sometimes the impossible becomes possible when you have no other choice. Those Marines needed support, and we provided it." As they drove back to base, Chen stared out the window at the rugged landscape. She understood that word of her shot would spread quickly through the military community. Extraordinary achievements in the armed forces rarely remained secret for long, especially when lives were saved in the process. What bothered her wasn't the attention that would inevitably come. It was the growing realization that she didn't fully understand how she had made the shot herself. The mathematical calculations had been complex but manageable. The environmental factors had been challenging but not unprecedented. But something else had guided that bullet to its target, something beyond training and expertise. Her father had always told her that hunting was about more than marksmanship. It required understanding your environment, respecting your equipment, and trusting instincts that couldn't be taught in any classroom. Perhaps those lessons from the cornfields of Iowa had prepared her for this moment in ways that military training never could. When they arrived back at base, Chen was surprised to find Colonel Martinez waiting for them in the vehicle depot. His expression was serious, but she could see something else in his eyes. A mixture of pride and concern that suggested her life in the military was about to change dramatically. "Sergeant Chen," the colonel said as she stepped out of the vehicle, "I need to speak with you immediately. We have some things to discuss about what happened out there today." Colonel Martinez led Chen to his private office, closing the door behind them with unusual formality. The walls were lined with commendations, unit photographs, and tactical maps that spoke to decades of military service. Chen had never been in the colonel's office before, and she felt the weight of the moment as she took a seat across from his desk. "Sergeant, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room," the colonel began, settling into his chair with a serious expression. "Your shot today has created what we might call a complicated situation." Chen felt her stomach tighten. "Sir, did I violate any protocols? I followed proper engagement procedures and had authorization from Captain Rodriguez." "No, Sergeant, you didn't violate anything. In fact, you exceeded every expectation we could have had." The colonel leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "The problem is that your shot was so extraordinary, it's raised questions at levels far above our pay grade." He opened a folder on his desk and extracted several documents. "I've already received calls from the Pentagon, ballistics experts from 3 different agencies, and representatives from advanced weapons development programs. Everyone wants to understand how a standard M24 rifle system achieved results that our most sophisticated computer models said were impossible." Chen shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Sir, I just applied the fundamentals I was taught, combined with careful observation and mathematical calculation. There wasn't anything mysterious about it." "Sergeant, with respect, that's not entirely accurate." The colonel pulled out a detailed ballistics report. "This analysis was conducted by some of the military's top experts. They've concluded that your shot required compensations for factors that weren't part of your training curriculum: wind patterns at multiple altitudes, microclimate variations, even adjustments for the Earth's rotation over the bullet's flight time." Chen studied the report, recognizing some of the technical terminology, but struggling with the more advanced concepts. "Sir, I did make some intuitive adjustments based on what I observed through my scope. Maybe I compensated for more factors than I realized. That's exactly what concerns certain people, Sergeant. Intuitive adjustments that accidentally account for graduate-level physics? Instinctive calculations that happen to solve equations most people need computers to handle?" The colonel's voice carried a note of genuine puzzlement. "Either you're a mathematical genius who's been hiding her abilities, or something else happened on that watchtower." Chen thought back to those final moments before taking the shot. She remembered the strange sense of clarity that had come over her, the way the complex variables had seemed to arrange themselves into a clear pattern in her mind. It hadn't felt like solving equations. It had felt more like recognizing something she had always known. "Colonel, I've been thinking about this too," she said slowly. "I can't fully explain what happened. The training helped. The calculations were important, but there was something else. It felt like the shot was meant to happen." The colonel nodded thoughtfully. "That's not an unusual feeling among exceptional marksmen, Sergeant. Many snipers report similar experiences when they make extraordinary shots. The question is whether we're dealing with exceptional human performance or something that needs to be studied and replicated." He pulled out another document, this one bearing the seal of a military research division Chen didn't recognize. "I've been asked to offer you an opportunity, Sergeant. There are people who want to study your abilities, to understand how you achieved what you did. This could involve advanced training, specialized equipment, and assignments that would take you far beyond conventional sniper duties." Chen felt a chill of apprehension. The last thing she wanted was to become some kind of laboratory subject or experimental weapon system. "Sir, what if I prefer to remain with my current unit and continue standard operations?" "That's your choice, Sergeant, and I'll support whatever decision you make. But I want you to understand the implications." The colonel's expression grew even more serious. "Word of your shot is going to spread throughout the military community whether we like it or not. 7 Marines are alive because of what you did, and they're going to tell their story. Other units are going to request your support for impossible missions. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Chen stared out the window at the training grounds where soldiers were conducting routine marksmanship practice. Their targets were at standard distances, their conditions were controlled, and their expectations were manageable. She envied their simplicity. Sir, may I ask what you would do in my situation? Colonel Martinez leaned back in his chair, considering his words carefully. Sergeant, I've seen a lot of extraordinary soldiers over the years. Some of them let their abilities go to their heads and burned out quickly. Others tried to hide from their potential and never reached their full capabilities. The best ones found a way to use their gifts responsibly while staying true to their principles. He gestured toward the unit photographs on his wall. Every person in those pictures had a moment when they discovered they were capable of more than they thought possible. Your moment just happened to involve a rifle and a 2-mile shot that saved 7 lives. Chen studied the faces in the photographs, wondering what impossible things they had accomplished and how they had dealt with the consequences. Colonel, if I agree to this advanced training and research, what guarantees do I have that I won't be turned into some kind of weapon that's only valued for its killing potential? None, the colonel replied honestly. But I can tell you this. The military needs soldiers who can make impossible shots when lives are on the line. The question is whether you want to help train others to do what you did, or whether you want to be the only person who can do it. Chen realized that her decision would affect not just her own future, but potentially the lives of countless other soldiers who might find themselves in desperate situations like the Marines she had just saved. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than any rifle she had ever carried. 3 months later, Chen found herself back at the same watchtower on Hill 247. But this time she wasn't alone. A group of advanced marksmanship instructors and military researchers had gathered to witness her attempt to recreate the impossible shot under controlled conditions. The morning was similar to that fateful day. Clear skies, variable winds, and perfect visibility across the canyon. But everything else had changed. Chen now wore specialized equipment that monitored her heart rate, breathing patterns, and even the micro-movements of her muscles as she prepared to shoot. Sophisticated measuring devices recorded wind conditions at multiple altitudes, and high-speed cameras were positioned to track the bullet's flight path. Sergeant Chen, called Dr. Rebecca Foster, the lead researcher from the Advanced Marksmanship Study Group, we're ready to begin the first attempt whenever you are. Chen settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar weight of her M24 rifle. Over the past 3 months, she had worked with Dr. Foster's team to understand the science behind her extraordinary shot. They had run countless computer simulations, analyzed video footage frame by frame, and even built scale models of the terrain to test various theories about what had made her shot possible. The target this time was a specially designed sensor array that would record the exact point of impact and the bullet's angle of arrival. It was positioned at the same location where the enemy sniper had been eliminated 3 months earlier. All monitoring stations report ready, announced Technical Sergeant Williams, who was coordinating the various measurement systems. Environmental data is being recorded continuously, and high-speed cameras are active. Chen began her breathing routine, but something felt different. The intense focus that had come so naturally during the life-or-death situation seemed harder to achieve under these clinical conditions. She was acutely aware of the dozen people watching her every movement, recording her every breath. First shot whenever you're ready. Sergeant, Dr. Foster said quietly through her headset. Chen squeezed the trigger smoothly, and the rifle fired with its familiar crack. Through her scope, she watched the empty air where her bullet was traveling, knowing that sophisticated instruments were tracking its path through space. Miss, called the observer at the target location. Impact approximately 15 meters left and 8 meters low. Dr. Foster made notes on her tablet while Chen chambered another round. Sergeant, can you describe what felt different about that shot compared to your original engagement? Chen considered the question while making scope adjustments. Ma'am, during the original shot, I wasn't thinking about the science or the measurements. I was focused entirely on saving those Marines. The calculations felt intuitive rather than mathematical. Interesting, Dr. Foster replied. For the next shot, try to recreate your mental state from that day. Don't worry about our instruments. Just focus on hitting the target. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, trying to transport herself back to that desperate morning when 7 lives hung in the balance. She thought about the intercepted radio communications, the time pressure, and the weight of responsibility that had driven her to attempt the impossible. When she opened her eyes and looked through her scope, something had shifted. The target seemed clearer, and the complex environmental factors began arranging themselves into patterns she could intuitively understand. She made minute adjustments to her scope, not based on calculations but on a feeling that was difficult to explain. "Second shot," she announced, and squeezed the trigger. This time the impact was much closer, only 3 meters right and 2 meters high. Still not a direct hit, but close enough to demonstrate that something extraordinary was happening. "Excellent improvement," Dr. Foster noted. "Your compensation for wind drift and bullet drop was nearly perfect on that attempt." Over the next 2 hours, Chen fired 12 more shots, each one getting progressively closer to the target. By the final shot of the session, she achieved a direct hit on the sensor array, replicating her impossible shot under controlled conditions. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Foster shared the preliminary data analysis that evening. The measurements showed that Chen's most accurate shots correlated directly with specific changes in her biometric readings: decreased heart rate, altered breathing patterns, and brainwave activity that suggested an almost meditative state. "Sergeant," Dr. Foster explained, showing Chen the data on a large monitor, "it appears that your extraordinary marksmanship ability is linked to your capacity to enter a highly focused mental state that allows you to process complex environmental information at an unconscious level." Chen studied the charts and graphs, recognizing the patterns that emerged during her best shots. "So you're saying I can teach this to other snipers?" "That's exactly what we're saying. We believe your natural abilities can be understood, measured, and potentially taught to others." Dr. Foster's excitement was evident. This could revolutionize advanced marksmanship training across the entire military. 6 months later, Chen stood in front of her first class of advanced sniper students at the newly established Precision Marksmanship Training Center. The curriculum she had helped develop combined traditional ballistics instruction with mental conditioning techniques, biometric monitoring, and the systematic development of what researchers now called intuitive ballistics calculation. "The shot you're going to learn to make isn't about defying physics," she told her students. "It's about understanding physics so completely that the calculations become instinctive. It's about trusting your training, your equipment, and your ability to make the impossible possible when lives depend on it." As Chen watched her students begin their training, she thought about the 7 Marines whose lives had been saved by a shot that no one believed was possible. Now, because of that moment, hundreds of other soldiers would learn to make their own impossible shots when the time came. Colonel Martinez had been right. Exceptional soldiers found ways to use their gifts responsibly while staying true to their principles. Chen had discovered that her greatest gift wasn't just her ability to make impossible shots, but her capacity to teach others to believe in their own potential to achieve the impossible when it mattered most.